Marty, we do have a quorum.
I'm going. Sorry. I'm going to wait one more minute and see if anybody else shows up, and then we'll be on our way.
Rachel, can you see if JT Newberry's in the waiting room?
No, the only person is somebody I know who's an outside participant. Oh, in the rating room, yeah.
He's not there yet. When I see him come in, I will move him over.
Okay. Okay, so it's 6:01. I'd like to call this meeting to order. First, Rachel, will you read the county notice for the meeting, please?
Sure will. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with Emergency Ordinance Number 20-A14, an emergency ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster. The committee members who are electronically present at this meeting are Marty Meth, Lee Condor, Marty Davis, Nancy Hunt, Peter Thompson, Rick Seaman, Todd Cohn, and Tom Paoletti. We also have the Planning Commissioner, Daniel Bailey. Staff present are Rachel Falkenstein, myself, and Carolyn Schaefer, and Roger Johnson. The committee members, the persons responsible for receiving public comment are the Places29 Rio CAC. The opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting are posted on the Albemarle County calendar. And members of the public who are in attendance who wish to speak during portions of discussion of this meeting may raise their hand and will be called upon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I would note that Judy is to be marked down as excused. She called up, she had a conflict and may join us later. I think Rick may leave sometime toward the end of the meeting as well. So with that, we have, I wanted to introduce, we have a new member, Martha Davis, who likes to be called Marty. Marty, will you unmute yourself, introduce yourself, give us a couple of words of introduction.
Hi, I'm Marty Davis. We moved to Albemarle County about 5 years ago, basically to be near our children. And I used to be in education until I retired. I started out as a speech pathologist and then a teacher, and I've taught everything from pre-K to high school and ended up in administration. The small town town and county where we lived had basically no planning, so I can see how important it is. And I'm interested in this committee because I believe it's really important for citizens to have input, even though they don't get to make the final decisions, but we do need to have input.
Okay, and I just would add, you live in the Carsbrook area.
Yes.
Too, so
Yes.
that's a little bit different from anybody else in the committee. Okay, thank you. So the next item on the agenda are the meeting minutes. Would somebody please make a motion to approve or revise the minutes? If anybody have any comments first on the minutes, let me ask it that way.
They look good to me. I read through them. I didn't see anything wrong.
Thank you.
So I'll move to approve.
Okay, have a second.
I'll second and point out that I asked Tom to correct Rachel's name twice in the course of the minutes.
Okay. Okay, so all in favor of approving, say aye, or raise your hand. That'll be easier this time. Thank you. Any nays? No? Okay, thank you. So that's approved. Okay, the next item on our agenda is an update on the Albemarle County economic development activities. Roger Johnson who is the Director for Economic Development. The floor is yours.
Well, first of all, thank you for having JT and I here tonight. It's a real privilege to be able to speak to this group and very much appreciate your engagement. I think the process is going to be JT is going to explain a little bit about what we do on a normal day-to-day basis, how COVID impacted our daily work plan. And then the bulk of what we're going to talk about is public-private partnerships and how the CAC helps shape the future of what those look like. JT?
Okay, let me take myself off of mute here. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
And everybody can see the screen just fine that I've shared?
We can see your presenter mode with the notes, JT.
Okay. Does this,
That looks better.
this is better. Okay, great. Thanks, Rachel. Appreciate that. Roger and I really want to get to the Q&A portion of tonight. So I'm going to try to spend about 5 minutes focusing on the activities of the Economic Development Office since the onset of the pandemic. I'll give a little bit of background. Roger's going to focus on public-private partnerships, and then we will take questions. So I'm going to try to speak for about 5 minutes. Roger, maybe closer to 10, but then we would love to get to your Q&A. Economic development covers a lot of different things, so we want to make sure we're reserving time to talk about the things that are most meaningful to you. So really quickly up on the screen, I've got a photograph of the core team. We work with a lot of different people across different functions, but on the far left is our economic development project manager, Jennifer Schmack. A beardless version of me is next to her, and next to me is the Deputy County Executive, Doug Walker, and then Roger's on the far right there. So I wanted to make sure that the committee was aware that, you know, the county adopted its first ever economic development strategic plan in 2018, and that included 7 different goals. And a few that I wanted to mention that we we've continued to work on throughout the pandemic are first, our program called BRE, and that's Business Retention and Expansion. We work with businesses that are located here that are growing or experiencing a challenge of some type, and we try to figure out how we can best assist them. One company that comes to mind that is located not too far from the Rio 29 CAC area, up Route 29, is a company called the Seraphic Group. They produce a health supplement called Restore. They were looking to expand into international markets, and we were able to connect them with the state program to do some marketing trips and get into some European markets, and they're continuing to grow. I should say that under this strategic plan, we were focusing explicitly on primary businesses. Those are businesses that produce a good or service right here in Albemarle and then sell it outside of our metropolitan statistical area, so outside of the region. So Seraphic Group is one example of those. Another thing we've been focusing on is site readiness. So our community, for businesses that are looking to grow and flourish and they need space to grow, our office would work with community development to make sure we had enough land designated, enough land zoned appropriately for commercial and industrial development. And so that could be through efforts around the comp plan, that could be through more infrastructure things like water and sewer, fiber internet, transportation, that sort of thing. And then the last thing I'll let Roger talk about, but that's public-private partnerships. And that's where, you know, we're partnering with the private sector to try to achieve public good that's identified in some sort of community document. So, you know, certainly relevant to you all would be the Rio 29 small area plan. Roger's going to walk us through some examples of that later. But really quickly, I'm going to try to fly through the past 9 months, right? So to take us back to early March, you know, we're starting to learn about coronavirus in America. And then, you know, by mid-March, it's beginning to have impacts in Albemarle County. And, you know, we were not different than any other place in America. We had a very strong and deep impact immediately. This graph shows initial unemployment claims. In a typical week, to go back to March 6th, we had 12 people file for unemployment. By the next week, we had 600 people. And then a few weeks later, in early April, we had over 1,400 people applying for unemployment. So, you know, that's over 100 times what our normal unemployment claims would look like. And you all probably observed it in the areas that you frequent. We had businesses that were closing, both in the public sector and in the private sector. And so the federal government passed what's known as the CARES Act, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. This was a multi-trillion-dollar bill that included many different components, some of which that you may have also heard of would be things like the Paycheck Protection Program. It included those payments to individual families. It also included state and local government aid, and Albemarle County got $19 million. We received $19 million from the state. Economic development has been working feverishly to distribute approximately 5 million of that 19 million that the county received. And we did that through a variety of different grant programs. The first one we did was targeted to the sectors that were hit the hardest. And that would be hospitality, tourism, restaurants. You know, the governor's orders were limiting the access to those businesses, and they were hit disproportionately. With our first grant, we wanted to apply an equity and inclusion lens to the funding that we were distributing. And so the program that we set up, which was called the LIFT grant, specifically focused on minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses. And that was based on data showing that those firms in particular have a more difficult access to capital. And if you follow the financial news, you may have heard, you know, some of those initial Paycheck Protection Program applicants, banks were only working with companies that they had existing relationships with. And so, so this grant provided $10, $20, and up to $50,000 grants to these kinds of businesses. And, you know, just to mention a couple of examples, you know, we had Mochico's, which is in 5th Street Station, and Croby's Urban Vittles. They're, I think they're the number 1 or number 2 restaurant on Yelp, a locally owned place in Mill Creek. We moved on from there to recognize that our nonprofits also played an important role in our local economy. Not only do they provide a lot of jobs, but they also support a lot of the businesses in our area. And so we partnered with our social services department, and we focused grants on these 3 buckets that you see listed on the screen. So the majority of this grant was focused on food, shelter, financial security, and childcare. And then our office was looking to support nonprofits that work in the economic development realm or contribute significantly to our quality of life, whether that's through arts or health in some way. A couple examples of that would be, you know, grants that we provided to the Chamber of Commerce. the Blue Ridge Irish Music School. They provide an opportunity for kids to get together and practice music. And the Yellow Door Foundation. This is a local nonprofit that provides housing to children that are children and their families that are receiving cancer treatments at the UVA Medical Center and surrounding health system. We moved on from there to try to assist businesses that were seeking to, pivot, expand outdoors, create spaces where they could continue to do commerce that the public would have confidence that it could be done safely. And so this grant covered things like tents and heaters and lighting and contactless payment systems. A couple of examples of that, many of these went to our agritourism uses. They were experiencing a ton of demand as people were looking for ways to get outside, but interact in a socially distant and safe way. But we had many different types of businesses, including things like daycares and retail businesses and the like. We moved on from there to do a second round of our LIFT program. This one was open to everybody. It wasn't focused on the hospitality and tourism industry, but if you were locally owned and operated, had a business license, could demonstrate an economic injury from the pandemic, you were eligible for this grant. A couple examples here would be like Batesville Market, a country store, Blue Ridge Cleaning, a company that does professional cleaning for our area businesses. And then the picture on the far right is meant to indicate some of our preschools, our for-profit preschools that we're trying to provide daycare during really challenging times and experiencing a lot of increased costs. I've made it all the way to December now. Our office is really focused on a buy local campaign. As we wrap up all those grants with the CARES money, we're initiating a campaign that will be expanded next year, but just educating the community about how important it is to buy local. And so you'll be seeing print ads, maybe ads on TV, maybe, I'm sorry if you've had to endure this, but maybe you've heard my voice on the radio. But we're trying to get the word out and let people know that this makes a big difference. And we're continuing to just spread that message as far as we can. Before I turn it over to Roger, I just really quickly want to acknowledge that we were invited here by Community Development tonight, but this has been across the community, across the organization effort to do the compliance, to do the public safety, to administer all of this has been a pretty heavy lift during some pretty challenging times. And so, I wanted to make sure I was giving credit to community development and the variety of internal groups that helped us, but certainly the Blue Ridge Health District, the city of Charlottesville, the Community Investment Collaborative is the nonprofit that helped us distribute all the money, all the grant money that I just described, and our Board of Supervisors. There's just been a lot of teamwork, and I didn't get a chance to mention that anywhere else, so I wanted to make sure I mentioned it there. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Roger to talk about public-private partnerships.
Thanks, JT. Would you be so kind to pull up the economic development website?
Yes.
And while JT is doing that, I'll mention one other activity that we work on quite frequently, and that's innovation and entrepreneurship. We currently have a partnership with the city of Charlottesville and the University of Virginia and the Chamber of Commerce to create a place where anyone can take an idea from ideation through proof of concept, through seeking investors to a brick and mortar business. You won't probably see a lot of impact of this particular project immediately. It takes a long time to get a company from an idea to a brick and mortar place. but it's the framework's been laid for creating a place for startups, and we're very proud of that. You'll hear more about that in the news, about some grants and some launch, but ultimately it's really good news for our community. Now, on to the thing that's probably most germane to this group is public-private partnerships. JT has in front of you pulled up the screen of the Albemarle Business Campus. This is a public-private partnership with a developer just across from the county office building on 5th Street. And the general terms are that the developer is going to build a complex and include in that complex elements that he wouldn't otherwise include but for the county's contribution. And that includes things like extended walking paths, dynamic parking for buses and or electrical vehicles, bus stations, and those types of public elements that go above and beyond what's required. And secondly, it reserves Class A office space for a primary business, meaning that the public good in this situation were both the elements as well as the ability to set aside office space for 5 years for the county to find a business that best fits the community's needs. If you go to the next slide, this particular public-private partnership is in downtown Crozet. It's with Newtown Crozet Associates. It's different in that the public elements that you see before you include a public plaza. That's the little space JT's highlighting there. The county wanted a downtown gathering space, as did the local community. In order to make that happen, we had to partner with the developer and bear part of the cost and part of the risk of building this public plaza. Otherwise, the development that you see surrounding it does not make financial sense for the developer. So this project would not move forward but for a county contribution. That is another example of a public-private partnership. In this particular case, the county contributed $1.6 million in cash for that plaza. The developer put up $1.6 million in construction loan to build a $3.2 million plaza. And we're going to repay the developer's portion of the cost through tax increment financing, which is a nice way to say the developer pays his taxes and we give him a portion of those taxes back to pay off that construction loan. JT, if you'd go to the next one. This is a unique public-private partnership and has a different public good. In this situation, we met with Perron Robotics through a business retention and expansion visit, much like JT described. And we learned this company needed help getting traction so they could grow in our community. Additionally, we were able to use what you see as an autonomous vehicle in front of you in the Crozet area to test and learn about how autonomous vehicles will shape the future built environment. It informs our future planning efforts, so we'll know if cutouts need to be available, how wide roads should be, how likely is this technology to change the way people function in the downtown area. Those types of things were information that was shared throughout the process. And then the final public-private partnership example is Woolen Mills. This exemplifies adaptive reuse of really a defunct building. It was a historic building that was no longer in use. We partnered with both the developer, whose name is Brian Roy, and Willow Tree, a local software and internet company, to find a home for them to permanently stay here. The public good here is Willow Tree was contemplating leaving to Colorado or North Carolina, and we wanted them to stay in our community. We did an in-plan analysis which measures economic impact, and it results in this company leaving would be about $132 million annually leaving our economy. That's a lot of money that helps keep our community unique for the coffee shops and the unique restaurants. So we certainly wanted to take efforts in this public-private partnership to make sure that that company stayed here. So it also includes public elements. We have some bridge, some walkways, some trails, and other things to make this a world-class campus. In fact, one of the pictures JT showed earlier included one of the recipients of a grant. They expanded their outdoor seating capacity with a grant in that particular area he's circling. What we wanted to illustrate to this team is public-private partnerships can take many different forms. It is an economic development tool to make a public good happen. In our case in the county, we don't proactively seek public-private partnerships unless it meets a county goal that has been stated or written somewhere. An example of why this is germane is all of the nice transformative public elements included in the Rio 29 small area plan would be the types of things that we would partner with a development firm to create and perhaps, contribute to making that vision become a reality. So with that being said, that concludes our comments for you all tonight. And we certainly would welcome any questions you have for either me or JT.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's try using the hands up. I have everybody's name up. So if somebody, okay, so. Well, Peter, you're not using that, but okay, Peter, so we'll start with you. Go ahead.
Thank you all for your presentation and your time and the good work. And I'm a firm believer in public-private partnerships. And you didn't use examples, but at much smaller scale, the investment the county did on building the center at Belvedere and the YMCA and is considering out at the Crozet Rec Center, to me, are very good examples as well of identified community needs with a relatively small investment, where the private sector, in this case, nonprofits, are doing all the legwork, most of the investment, and then going to do all the operations. So the county doesn't have to, fund it for forevermore, as another small scale example. And the examples you use, I'm certainly in favor of and support. But I know one of the criticisms of this type of initiative is government picking winners and losers. Can you address how the county, you did a little bit towards the end there, but can you address more about how the county avoids that dangerous pitfall?
Yeah. And Peter, I'll just add to that, unless there's the dynamics I'm about to talk about, it also could be circuitous to our normal processes. And we don't want to do that in any way, shape, or form. We want to conduct business as transparent as possible. But we have the grant itself is called an Enable grant. And in it, it was approved by the Economic Development Authority and the Board of Supervisors. And it states what projects would qualify and those that would not. And it basically has to meet two criteria. One is it meets a but-for provision, meaning we're not going to partner on anything that could be built by a developer themselves. We only partner when it makes the project financially feasible or adds elements that the community wants. So the first thing it has to do is meet that but-for provision. So it's not a handout, it's a partnership that gets what the community wants. The second part I think is important about the Enable grant is it must achieve a stated county goal, right? And a good example would be the elements in the Rio 29 plan. If a developer started to build those or started to build a development that didn't include those elements, we would reach out and try to get them to include those elements, whether it's the park at Albemarle Square or the mall or some of the other features that you probably are familiar with. Conversely, if a developer wanted to put a baseball stadium there, that's not something that we would reach out and have a public-private partnership discussion about, because it does not meet a stated goal. So if you want to know what we would partner on and what we wouldn't, it would have to be in a plan or a strategic visioning statement for us to entertain it. Otherwise, it's outside the scope of what we do. And as you know, those plans are based on what you all say is important to that particular community or magisterial district.
Thank you. Other questions? Nancy?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the comments about the Rio 29, the form-based code. I hope that we finalize those plans soon with supervisors and can move forward. But in a more general sense, we've obviously got some huge challenges thanks to COVID for all of our retail businesses, but in particular, the malls. Have you thought about, focused on, started any initiatives to with the retail base here, which is until recently phenomenal?
Yeah, I could speak to that. Well, first of all, let's address the mall and then we can talk about retail in general. We reached out to the previous owners of the mall, which I say owners, so that everybody's aware, it has 3 different owners at one time, JCPenney, Belks, and then Washington Prime, and asked about future plans and asked if they would be a willing partner. And quite frankly, at that time, they were not. So, we cannot move forward on a person's private property without a willing partner. So first and foremost, that's the first hurdle that has to be cleared. The second is, you may know that the mall's now in receivership, which is a nice way of saying, hey, there's a little bankruptcy going on. They've moved it over to a third party to manage during this time frame to figure out what the future holds for that. And another portion of the mall has already been purchased. We've reached out to one of the managing partners for the mall to ask about the future of that and determine if they would have an interest. Again, it takes a willing partner. This particular owner only owns a portion, the JCPenney portion. So we're not really sure I said to Belk, sorry, I meant Sears, what's going to happen with the other two parcels there. But once it comes under single ownership, or if it does come under single ownership, it's a lot more likely that a public-private partnership or even a potential redevelopment project could happen there. When there's three different owners, it's nearly impractical to come to any sort of agreement because all the parties have to agree to a bunch of things in principle. So the answer is yes, we have reached out to the malls. For retail in general, we I guess it was maybe a year ago, please correct me if I misspeak, JT Newberry, we hired a company called Retail Strategies as a contractor to come in and do two things. One was to look at the downtown Crozet area and make specific recommendations on how they can build that to be successful long-term. And the second was to look at the county as a whole and determine what we're doing really well and where we may have retail leakage. And as part of that particular process, this company, Retail Strategies, agreed to provide recruiting services for the next 2 years. And they go to places like Recon, which is the biggest retail convention in the world, or the shopping centers have conventions in Atlanta and other parts of the Eastern United States. And they go to those particular conferences and represent us so that you as a taxpayer don't have to bear that burden. It's a shared burden. And what they have done is they've partnered with local development firms where we have vacant properties. They share the details about those properties with retailers they know who are looking at this particular market. Each retailer has different dynamics. Like if you think of Data Shoe Warehouse, they look at a 3-mile radius. They want a certain amount of income around that particular area and a certain amount of households, which is much different than a grocery store who is looking more at a smaller circle and drive times. And that's just an example of how each retailer varies. Well, Retail Strategies knows all of these individual types of retailers' needs, and they're able to match our vacant storefronts and or developments that are in the pipeline to the retailers that would be of interest to this community, as well as local businesses who may be expanding as well. So that's one thing we're doing for the retail market. I would say the second thing is, and JT sort of hinted at this in his presentation, were the grant programs. We recognize that the retail industry is struggling, and as such, they were the scoring system for the retail, for the hospitality, tourism, and so forth, took into account the amount of harm. So many retailers, particularly local retailers, were given a grant. So those are the three things that I can authentically say we're doing now. I don't know that if we're going to be able to take enough action or catalyze enough change where any business that was going to fail otherwise is going to be able to survive, Nancy. What we're trying to do is prop up those businesses we believe that can be successful long-term until we get to the other side of the pandemic, and those businesses can then flourish.
Okay, thank you.
Really quickly, I just thought I'd mention, I put a link in the chat for today's, for tonight's meeting. One of the reasons we pulled the public-private partnership examples from our website is because we wanted to make sure that we were sharing all the different economic development information that's available online. So Roger was just talking about the retail strategy studies. You can access both the information for the county as a whole, as well as the downtown Crozet information here. And then Peter, as Roger was answering some of your earlier questions about like the Enable grant and that sort of thing, that information is available online too. So I would really encourage everyone to go to enablealbemarle.com or I'm sorry, .org, and take a look around at the different information that's out there. There's a lot of good stuff there. So just wanted to make that plug as well.
Okay, other questions? I mean, are there any questions from the attendees? And then I'm gonna ask some questions at the end, but I'd like to see.
No one has their hand raised at this time.
Okay, fine. Tom, go ahead, please.
Yes, I was just curious, two things. Any updates on the two grocery stores that want to move into the area around Route Road? And the other question I was concerned about, or if you had any information, is office space. Yeah, like my son and my daughter both are working from home and will probably be for another year or so. I was wondering if you had any updates on how office space is being currently used in the county area.
I'm gonna take the grocery stores because it's the easiest, JT, and then I'll let you handle what's going on with Class A office space and how we use CoStar. Yeah, I don't have any updates on the grocery stores, Tom. That's the short answer. Sorry to report that. JT?
Yeah, Tom, just to make sure I'm clear, with the grocery stores, you were asking about Lidl and Aldi?
Yes.
Yeah, I would just say our office doesn't have any information that hasn't been published in the newspaper. But and Rachel may have more to add, but I know those businesses have continued to pursue the steps necessary to open in both of those locations, with a ARB sign submittals and those kinds of things. So my expectation is that they're continuing to move forward. On the office question, I think I would say that one of the big macro takeaways from the pandemic has been that, things that were slowly coming online, like working from home, the ability to effectively work from home, has been dramatically accelerated. Things that maybe originally we thought were going to take 10 years to happen have happened all in 1 year. I'll say that nationally, there are some real estate markets where the office demand has gone up, that it's actually increased since the onset of the pandemic. And then of course, many more areas where it's gone down. Our community in particular, prior to the pandemic starting, we had like a 1% vacancy rate for Class A office, which would be the most desirable type of office spaces for those primary businesses that I was mentioning earlier, as well as our target industries, the biotechs and the high-tech technology companies. So I expect that we'll see a kind of a whiplash, just like we saw on the unemployment graph. I think that so many of us are starving for social interaction, being stuck at home. And I think companies will find a mix of at home and in office settings. That's kind of my personal opinion. There's also, last thing I'll say is that there are some developers that envision there being an exodus of the really high priced, downtown Manhattan, downtown Washington, DC offices that are seeking a really high quality of life, like what Albemarle offers, to move their workforces to a place like ours. So they feel like kind of our mid-tier market will experience higher demand after the pandemic subsides. Those would be my thoughts.
Yeah. JT, you sort of took the words a little bit out of my mouth. Have you tried to advertise for people? Because that's clear there's a trend for people looking at lower cost living, but still good living environments. And Albemarle County is really a place that I came from the Washington area, so I know the differences in housing costs and in traffic. And
that's where I grew up. Yeah.
Okay, so do you all do any advertising to try to drag people down, encourage people to come down here, not retirees like me, but working level.
Can I field that one first, JT?
Yeah.
So, I've worked in economic development all over, the Southeast in some form or fashion. And this is the first place when we did a strategic planning exercise, this is the first place that did not want us to actively recruit businesses. So a normal function of economic development offices is to go out, pick some targeted industries, go to these conferences where they're located, tell them why they should locate in your community and try to recruit them here. When we went out to the community, we heard a resounding feedback that that's not what this community desired, Marty. They wanted us to help our existing businesses grow. So we're focused on innovation and entrepreneurship, business recruitment and expansion, business retention and expansion visits, as well as those types of activities, and not necessarily recruiting people or jobs to come here. We, when we brought this up as a uniquity for our community, it was clear that our leaders at that time did not want to tread down the path of actively recruiting. That doesn't mean that the normal process of recruitment doesn't happen. By that, I mean, the state of Virginia has an economic development partnership. They market to the entire world. And through that marketing process, the county provides available sites for business. So the world gets wind of what we have available, and then they'll send a request for information down to our department, and we respond to those particular requests to see if we have if it meets the community's goals and desires. And by that, I mean, for example, if I brought a Toyota plant to Greenville, North Carolina, there would be a parade. And if I brought a Toyota plant to Albemarle County, there'd be a parade out of town, right? So we have to make sure that they meet what this community wants. And if they do, we provide a response to those particular folks who are looking, be it a site selector or an individual business, and let them know what we have and don't have in terms of space to accommodate their business needs. So we don't really actively market or recruit, we just respond.
So I have one other question along the lines of, you mentioned that you look at site readiness. Now here in this particular area, Rio area, because you have the small area plan, but almost everything is built up and we have a lot of empty spaces. How do you market those empty spaces, or do you at all?
Well, I think you'd have to look at it in a little more global aspect. We don't look at it by magisterial district. We look for things that meet the minimum requirement for primary business. For example, JT, what is the minimum amount that can be on the VEDP website? Is it 20?
Well, in acres, they want at least 3 acres.
3 acres. So it has to be a minimum of 3 acres. And for it to be of use, JT touched on this, it needs to be appropriately industrially zoned. It means it can't have a lot of permitting requirements for special use things. A business doesn't want to wait 1.5 years to determine if they can locate at this location or not. It has to have all the infrastructure in place. And JT mentioned water, sewer, fiber, but it also includes other things, often like redundant power, appropriate waste disposal, and other things that a business would need. What we have done is identified a diversity of product needed in this community. The Class A office space, when we did the public-private partnership, was not available in Albemarle County. There's some in the pipeline in downtown Charlottesville, but that's $40 a square foot. Where if we partnered with somebody out in the county, it's going to be in the high 20s, maybe mid 20s in terms of per square foot cost. So we were trying to fill a gap for that type of product. Other types of products that we're lacking in our community is rail serve products. So we would, our next goal would be to ready some sites for either rail served and or light manufacturing. So what we're trying to do is provide our community with the best chance of keeping our businesses here that we can, as well as the meet the increasing demand. All that to say, Marty, we don't look at it from a parcel by parcel analysis. We look at it between the gaps of what products available and what the businesses actually want, and then identify those sites that meet those criteria, and then either work with the UVA Research Park, a private developer, a private landowner to make those spaces site ready.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And if I could, and the only thing I would add to that is that the Rio 29 small area plan and the form-based code really helps facilitate those site readiness goals. That's, I think, one of the best examples in the county of, you know, this is exactly what we want. And you know, if you build this and use it in this way, like you're, there's some certainty for the businesses that are trying to decide between investments in different places. So, you know, I know it, I'm sure that many of you have spent a lot of time helping to facilitate that. And you should know that that makes a real difference when Roger and I speak to a business and say, you know, here's what you can expect in terms of approval process, review and approval process.
Yeah. Hey, Marty, I know you didn't ask this, but I'm going to build on JT's comments and sort of put a plug in for the form-based code. A lot of it has to do with the built environment, and that's important. But what it does for a developer is it allows the market conditions to determine who the tenants are and not necessarily a planning process. It's a huge benefit to the developer to know that they can put a business in there that can afford to pay the lease and be successful long-term, as opposed to just saying, these are the types of uses that are allowed. So it's a hidden nugget that a lot of people don't talk about.
Okay, thank you. No, that's helpful. We're going to be looking at land use from the master plan standpoint next year. I'm going to talk a little bit about it later on in this meeting for a second. So that's helpful to us, and your comments are helpful. We'll keep that in back of our mind in terms of really what you're looking for is maximizing flexibility to people who are coming in and looking for opportunities and business opportunities. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, well, Nancy, raise your hand. Go ahead.
I want to say, Roger, that I hope you make that last statement pitch to the Board of Supervisors, particularly because in the last work session, there was a question about, gee, why would developers want to do this, and is it really worthwhile? And I think it is. Obviously, I've devoted a fair amount of time to it. And I see Ned is apparently on the phone, so I trust he heard your comments as well. He's probably heard them more than once. Thank you.
Okay, Roger, thank you. JT, thank you very much. You're welcome to stay. And have a good holiday if you decide to leave. Right.
Thank you.
See you.
Okay. What I would like to do next is go a little bit out of order because I know Ned has an appointment. I know he has time, but I think what I'd like to do is go to the liaison updates for Ned and Dan first, and then we'll come back to Rachel and cover her both liaison updates and the traffic plan. Is that all right, Rachel? Okay, thank you. So Ned, you're on. Can you?
All right, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel, for getting me back straight in my head. I had in my head that this was a 7 o'clock start tonight for some reason, so I jumped on earlier. Don't have a whole lot to report. I'll try to think of the list items. I'm driving to my next meeting with corporate here, so I hope there's not too much background noise. The sidewalk project along Rio, actually yesterday was supposed to be the day we were to receive bids, and they do kind of a pre-proposal process to identify some, how many contractors would be out there, fit the bill, and would work well. And they had identified, I think, 5 or 6, but unfortunately no bids were received yesterday. So that things were kind of marching along in the timeline, but then that's a little bit of a hiccup. So they have to go back. I think they go back to those pre-identified proposals or folks that they identified in that pre-process to see if there was a reason for no bids and to work with them to try to get some bids out. So that Rio sidewalk project is lumped into some sidewalk projects around in some other areas of the county. But that's a little bit of, hopefully that gets worked out and isn't too much of a delay, but it's certainly not what staff was expecting from what they would receive yesterday. I was, Rachel will give the has Rachel already done the Rio Road corridor study update?
No, I thought we would cover you first because I know you were driving, and then
Yep.
Rachel.
I don't want to steal. I don't want to steal her thunder. So that was going to be a big one. That the timeline's coming together on that. So I'll allow her to go through that. And there's some things there that you guys will have to consider. I know Judy. If Judy's on, she's reached out about the pruning effort. And frankly, that's just going to have to get lumped into. There's been some conversation about some medians and that isn't necessarily where mowing is, but things growing up out of the concrete. And I think an effort like that is going to have to be lumped into that type of project or somehow combined in there if it's to be done by the county. And that will end up being a budget conversation of where that gets allocated and how. So I'm not saying that one is a dead issue, but it's kind of on hold until we get to that portion of the time to talk about it. I don't know if folks have been out. I mean, obviously the Greenbrier intersection is up and running.
Yeah.
So that's a long time coming, right? So we've been watching that and baby steps on the flower meadow. If there are and the other big deal is we did, hopefully some of you are paying attention to the Planning Commission joint meeting we did on our housing policy. We got together there Tuesday night with the Planning Commission to kind of get into the weeds or have some time to answer some specific questions with all 13 individuals included. And it seemed to be a very positive session. Good feedback on the housing policy to how to attack affordable housing. So that was a productive meeting. And outside of that, if there's areas you would like me to cover, I'm happy to do so. I know there was an Airbnb item that was a little bit, had some community interest. There was a stormwater issue over in the Woodbrook town that I believe that's being addressed. So there have been some things like that have popped up, but unless folks ask about those, I'll stop there and answer any questions as needed.
Are there any questions for Ned? Audrey?
Thank you for the water cleanup and project in Woodbrook. That it's turned out very well. Everybody's pleased. I did have a question about the pruning and weeds and stuff. I cannot remember, and I asked for clarification. Does that include all of Rio 29 around the grade separated interchange?
It came up as a topic both along the Pantops corridor, and then I brought up the Rio corridor. So it's not an issue that's isolated to any one spot. It seems like anywhere we have these medians that are concrete that obviously wouldn't see regular mowing, we have got weeds, things growing up out of there that are problematic. And in some places it's becoming even it's unsightly, but I mean, there's some places where it's becoming a visibility issue. So there's examples over on Barracks Road with it that there've been issues there. So it's a big enough topic that once we decide how to attack it, it'll be countywide in those where all these type of problems pop up.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
And I will tell you that the water project allowed me another opportunity to inquire about the litter that was happening behind the Goodwill. I know that came up at the last CAC meeting. So when that came up, there were some questions around Lisa Green and some zoning ordinance stuff that I had a chance in the board meeting to understand it further of who's responsible, but then highlighting that issue out there. So, anytime that water runoff happens, it seems to uncover because the litter goes right along with the water. So there was some more conversation about that as well.
Thank you. That's good.
Thank you. Okay. Dan, you're up next if you don't mind. Where are you sitting? It looks so nice out there.
Oh, that's the Riviera River right behind Belvedere. If you go through the trail area, you can get back to the river there.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm sitting in a closet in my house due to COVID and having in-laws that live with us too now. Planning Commission, as Ned said, excellent meeting put on by Dr. Pethia from county staff on affordable housing and the policies and working to make sure that we're keeping an eye on that and coming up with really good policies and strategies and tracking mechanisms so that we can keep people in place and build a very diverse, welcoming community. So I think that was a really good session this past Tuesday. A couple of weeks ago, one that confront the special use permit for the landscaping for the drive time that will be replacing Hardee's there on the corner of Rio and 29 was approved. The Planning Commission will be sent to the Board of Supervisors for their judgment. And coming up this next week on Tuesday, the Premier Circle, which is a little bit outside of the CAC, but right on the border there of the old Red Roof Inn and Segura, now Segura Solar, will be coming in front of the Planning Commission for hearing on its request for a rezoning to the neighborhood model district from its commercial zoning now. So that's kind of the highlights of what's been going on with the Planning Commission. A couple work sessions. There's of course some other things, big development question around Breezy Hill, Glenmore, but most of the other things are outside of the Rio district within the county that has been looked at by the Planning Commission in the last month.
Okay, thank you. Judy?
Yes, ma'am.
Unmute yourself, Judy. You're muted, Judy.
Okay, now it's on. Okay, it wouldn't unclick. Actually, this is for Dan. Okay, I've received several questions, comments that as Belvedere is being developed, you can't get to the northern loops of the RTF trails.
That
what are they going to be doing about that?
It's not closed yet. There's been an announcement.
No, it's closed.
Did they close it now? Okay. Yeah. So that's misinformation from the. Sorry, I'm getting a feedback. So they have established. Sorry, I'm hearing an echo in my ears. I don't know if.
Judy, why don't you shut off your microphone and see if that helps? Go ahead. Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, hearing myself in stereo is.
No, that's true. Okay.
So there's a temporary trail. There's a couple things going on there. I've already reached out when that announcement was made. The developer working on that parcel and the extension of Belvedere was closing it. They've opened up to the closer to the train tracks and the fire break behind the new Saco Center is extension into the trail. There's also been reached out to the Riviera Trail Foundation that is working to organize to make sure that trail could be improved, as well as clearing any of the lands to connect those through. They're assessing the situation. It kind of came honestly out of the blue a bit, even to me as a Belvedere and Planning Commission member, Belvedere on the Belvedere ARB, that was happening. I was under the impression that it had not been fully closed yet, but if they have actually already closed it, I will continue to keep it on my radar and have good contacts at the Riviera Trail Foundation. And so they will, and I'll keep this body up to date, but they will be looking for volunteers as anything as we try to reconfigure the trails, because that trail closing is expected to last on that developer's land. They have closed the rights to cross their land for about 2 years into 2022 for the development due to heavy. And so, yeah, that's the update I have. It's a work in progress, and I'm still waiting more information, but I will keep you up to date as I learn. We are working to establish a new trail configuration to provide continuity of the Riviera Trail through Belvedere. It's something that the people that live in Belvedere desperately want as well, because we use it quite frequently as well.
Okay, just kind of FYI, it was closed as of Friday, this past Friday.
Thanks for that.
Dan, are you on the Belvedere neighborhood Google group?
I am. Yeah, I don't always. I get a flood of emails, so I don't know which one.
There's been
Yeah.
a thread, there is a Google group of Belvedere neighbors that I'm
Yeah.
on, and it's been a daily update of how easy or hard it is and how you need to find it, and some efforts to work with the Belvedere HOA management company as well to try to get proper signage. As I understand it, I've not been able to get up there and look, but there is a lot of activity trying to address it from the neighborhood.
And I did place a formal request when it was, minutes after it was announced to the Nest property group to provide updated maps. They gave us a minor update, but I'll stay on that. Yeah, I haven't been able to get back over to those trails as well yet. I think the reality of the fact is we're going to have to, I would have liked to have had a little bit more heads up on behalf of the developer before the closing, but it is within their rights to do so because it's on their private land, and those trail accesses. And so we'll have to work with the Riviana Trail Foundation to reestablish trailheads and get permissions to reconfigure on other land.
Okay. Thank you. Nancy?
Marty, can I make a request real
Sure.
fast? This is Ned. There will be, as Rachel will define what the community engagement for the corridor study is, but February, maybe even January, but certainly February leading into March, I've always thought about having a town hall specifically on transportation, and I think the corridor study rollout will take care of that. But if there are, I have found in the past that when I hold some town hall meetings that if they're specific topics, sometimes make it more interesting than it's just a generic town hall meeting. So if this board wouldn't mind giving some thought that if there were some kind of big ticket or overview items that you would maybe appreciate having a town hall kind of centered on, then in our January meeting, I'd love to kind of have that, hear what those are, and then we can get it planned for the February, March as we lead into the budget season. So I'd appreciate any thoughts on that, but obviously not tonight, that's for January.
So
Thank you for that.
this is on transportation, just to be clear, and the paths in general.
And, I was going to do one on transportation, but I think as you'll learn from Rachel's presentation on the corridor study, that there won't be a need for a separate town hall on transportation.
Okay.
I think some of that's going to be, but if there are other topics that are on people's minds,
Okay.
and I can say we're going to have a town hall and it's going to be around X, Y, and Z, sometimes that kind of stimulates participation a little more than just, oh, I'm having a town hall meeting. So I'm just asking people to maybe brainstorm that, and we can bring it up again for conversation in January.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Rachel, I'm going to turn over Nancy, did you want to say something? I'm sorry.
Yes, Dan, I wonder if the planning commission discussed how to work on the Rio form-based code plan, and whether they were receptive to the plan, whether they had any particular comments.
Yeah, and Rachel can chime in here. We did, I can't remember when the last time that you came, Rachel, and presented. I think it was the last two months. Time passed about 6 weeks.
October, I think October, maybe earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. It's asking. We did have another meeting. I felt it went quite well and was received well. Rachel and got had to bear more of the comments, so I don't know how she feels about it. But I think in general the essence of the plan is really coming together, and the details are getting worked out. I think that was pretty much the feeling of the broader planning commission as well. I think that was I was hopeful. Well, anyways, we still don't have it approved, so it's a limit to how much, as any development happens between now and it being approved, the planning commission can consider the impending form-based code on any other development that happens in the area. I think that was a thing that was learned in a recent application. So, Rachel, do you have any comments or thoughts on how the meeting went with regards to form-based code?
Yeah, and I did look at my calendar while you were talking. It was November 17th. It
Oh
seems,
goodness, it was it feels like months ago.
it seems like it was a longer time ago. So
Yeah.
yeah, I thought it went really well. There was quite a bit of discussion and comments from the commission. I think it was over a 2-hour work session on just code. And it's a lot to cover in one discussion. But I felt most of the feedback we got from the commission focused on work that's still going to need to be done after this adoption happens if we move forward in March, like we're planning, because there's too much that we just couldn't get to with this kind of round of work. And so things like detailing out design specifications for civic spaces and parks and more detailed landscaping specifications, things like that we know are important in the work that we want to do, but we just can't tackle all of that with this kind of first step of form-based code. We're going to kind of get more sophisticated as we go along.
Yeah, I think one of the things that there was commitment and understanding or from the planning commission that we need to be thinking about how the county can help lead the transition into the form-based code as opposed to kind of be passive and try to come up with strategies to help with establishing those kind of civic spaces and other things.
Okay, thank you. Rachel, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So after a little bit of build up, I'm going to talk about the Rio Corridor Plan and give just a quick status update. I don't have a presentation or anything formal tonight, but just two things I wanted to share. The first is the overall project kind of scope and timeline. So we spent the past 6 weeks, 8 weeks working together, establishing a project team, internal team, and having some meetings with the consultant Line and Grade who we're working with on this project to just kind of understand kind of what the project scope will be, get some baseline mapping things done. And we've kind of penciled out a project schedule, and we plan to kick off in January 2021, so next month, and have a 12-month project schedule. And there'll be 4 major opportunities for public engagement. We're kind of breaking it up into 4 phases of work. The first phase will be just focused on, we're calling it discovery, trying to learn what the issues are in the corridor, a lot of mapping and analysis, but also listening sessions and engaging with users of the corridor, people who live there, people who work there, people who travel along the corridor. So that's kind of our first round of engagement, and that will begin in January. And then the second round of engagement we're calling Define, and that's when we kind of pull out the themes that we've heard from that discovery phase, identify challenges and opportunities along the corridor. The third phase we're calling Develop, and that's where we'll begin to draw out and pencil out some ideas for intersection improvements, roadway improvements, perhaps even some road sections with landscaping ideas and thinking about how development should relate to the roadway. And then the last phase will be Decide, where we'll take some of the options we considered in that develop phase, some of the options we developed, and make a decision on what route we will pursue based on those options. So each one of those phases, we will have a big engagement kind of series of opportunities for people to participate. We are going to, we're starting this in COVID. We don't know if we're going to end it in COVID or not, but we're going to try our best to have a variety of different ways to participate. So we will do Zoom meetings. We will do online questionnaires. We also will be going out to the corridor and doing safe, socially distanced engagement opportunities outside. Our communications office received grant fundings to purchase a van, and we will be taking that van out along the corridor and announcing via social media and online where we're going to be and when, so if people want to come talk to us, again, in a safe way outside, we'll have opportunities to do that as well. So the first phase, we will, in the next week or two, be kind of trickling out some information on when that engagement will get started in January, and I will share that with you all as I have it, so you can participate as all of you live or work in the area. So that's kind of the first thing. I just want to give the overview. The second thing that Ned alluded to is something that you all kind of need to be thinking about and hopefully can make a decision on next month at your January meeting, is we're going to also establish an advisory committee of a variety of stakeholders and users of the corridor to help guide this project. And that advisory committee, we anticipate, will meet probably about 4 times. There may be 1 or 2 more meetings. I would say 4 to 6 meetings throughout the course of the year. And we use them similar, Nancy, you'd be familiar with this, the way we used our RIO 29 steering committee to be kind of a sounding board on some concepts before we go out to the broader public. So it's not necessarily a deciding committee. The board of supervisors will be the deciding committee on what ultimately gets adopted. But this committee kind of helps us vet some concepts before we go out to the broader community with them. And we are going to select stakeholders from a variety of different corridor user types and stakeholders of kind of technical groups as well, VDOT being one of them. They have an important seat in this project. So there will be room for 1 CAC member on this advisory committee. So I bring that to you all tonight to think about if anyone is interested, and then I'll leave it up to Marty on how he wants to handle it. But if multiple people are interested, maybe it's a vote or a discussion among the group at your next meeting. But as I have more project materials kind of written down, we're pulling a lot of drafts of things together right now and getting it ready to share out. I can share that out with you all via email, so you can be thinking about whether you'd be interested in being involved in that committee. And if you're not on the individual on the committee, that doesn't mean you can't still be involved. Like I said, we'll have plenty of opportunities for you all to participate and engage on this project as it moves along. And I can also continue to give a monthly update to the group if you're interested at your regular monthly meetings as well. So that's what I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them on what I shared or what I haven't shared.
Well, I'm definitely interested. So yeah, if I can be the representative, I would be happy to do that.
Oh, we'll talk about that obviously at the next meeting. So I understand. I would have guessed you would be interested. Yes, Peter?
Thanks, Rachel, for the update. So do you have a sense of when, 2 questions. One, when you think the develop phase will be, the decide phase will be done as a first question? Do you have is that planned out yet?
Our estimate, our best guess and our hope is it's done by the end of the year. So by December 2021. Sometimes it's hard when we scope a project to know if that's going to play out that way. It could be longer.
I know, got a lot of uncertainty in 2021 still. And also in the discover stage, is it determined yet what formal studies like traffic studies in the corridor or certain intersections will be done or not?
So we aren't doing traffic counts with this study. We're in the middle of COVID, and traffic counts we do right now probably won't be very helpful because they're just not accurate. The plan is to look at, there've been a lot of various traffic studies up and down the corridor over the past 5 or so years or a little bit longer. The plan is to compile those and then apply a growth factor based on development we know that has occurred and just average growth that happens in the broader community, since this corridor is used by more than just the development along it. It's an obvious through corridor for the community. So they'll apply a growth factor to the previous studies and compile all of those into kind of one.
Okay, thank you.
Don?
Yes, Rachel, this advisory committee, will it have published meeting dates and open to the public?
We haven't discussed that, but that's probably something we can do. We would likely, if we did go that route, we probably do it the same way we do with your CAC meetings.
Okay.
of the panelists who are on the committee in the meeting, and then we can make it open to anyone to come and listen to. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. It's not something we can consider.
Thank you.
Just out of, I have two questions. Who else has comments? Audrey? Oh, okay. So I have a question. Are you looking at any sort of technologies to speed, to manage the traffic in the corridor? Is that part of what you're looking at? I mean, there are ways of measuring where the traffic is and using, I don't know, artificial intelligence to manage the light systems. I mean, you can go fairly far out and do a better job than just simply traffic timing. So the question I have is, how are you handling technology, or are you?
So that's certainly, that could be an option that we consider as like a future solution to help manage traffic in the corridor. It's not something, we're not using artificial intelligence or any sophisticated modeling technology to do the study itself. We don't have the capacity or the funds to do that.
No, I wasn't suggesting that. I was just thinking about technology for actually managing the traffic, thinking about solutions as opposed to doing the study per se.
Yeah, like I said, that could be a potential solution. We have not even begun to scope what the solutions would look like, as we'll do engagement around that and hear from you all before we get to that step.
And I wonder, I mean, you say you're going to use these studies and then extrapolate from them. I wonder if it's short-sighted to not do some contemporaneous studies now, because situations change from 5 years ago. COVID has made some changes. And there's been a lot of new buildings, and these studies, my guess is, since I don't know what studies you're doing, are mostly much more narrowly focused than the type of focus you're going to be doing in this corridor study.
I think you're right, but there also have been traffic counts on Rio itself that are outside of just a development here and a development there. So I think with all of the data pulled together, it will give us a pretty clear picture about what's happening on the corridor. But certainly that's why we're doing the discover phase, and that's why we're doing engagement as part of the discover phase, to hear from you all. Because if there's some anecdotal information you have to share, about a certain intersection and how it functions, or the safety of walking down a certain sidewalk, that's what we want to hear, and supplement the studies and the council have done with that type of information.
Okay.
Marty, I'll say this about the traffic counts, because obviously it's a concern, and the timing that I've had as well. Nancy can tell you that if you do a traffic study at the wrong time, when you don't have the true counts going on, then it can create issues, just like she's dealing with down with the intersection there, down along Branchlands. They did that traffic study within a month or two of it opening up, and that parallel road system wasn't really in full swing. Nobody really was traveling it yet. And now that study is still driving decisions for traffic calming pieces. The beauty of I hate to say it's the beauty, but there's yet to be a study that doesn't show some failing aspects. I mean, if you think of the Wetzel property, the Warner area, the intersection there with Warner and Rio, it was a failing intersection. So, and we know it's only going to continue to grow. So a new traffic count under COVID, when it seems, just anecdotally driving out of there every day, the traffic is down. I don't know what that does, and I'd hate to have to delay it until things get back to normal. I'd love to know what the full onslaught of vehicle traffic is going to be with the center up and running at full blast and the SACA system. I just don't know when we're going to get back to seeing what those impacts are really going to be. So I think at this point, everybody knows there are issues along the whole corridor, and we need to get this study going and start talking about what the solutions can be. I don't want it to get lost when Rachel says anecdotal information. It's so easy to just thinking traffic, cars, and intersections, but this is the opportunity to also be understanding the pedestrian pathways and sidewalks and the bike system. an issue popped up about a month ago in front of the Catholic school, that we had that sidewalk that if you're traversing towards, towards Dunmora, it just runs out. And then you have to walk down on the road or you have to walk into the Catholic school property. And the kids are out because they're doing social distancing. They're using more of that space. And people trying to get to the trail or to Penn Park are having to cut through the Catholic school system or the school property because we don't have any sidewalk that takes them to continue along and get them around the property line. And that's the type of anecdotal information that this study is definitely going to need, so that we can get at, well, what are pedestrians encountering when they're trying to maneuver around here? Same with the biking system. So, there's no way to do pedestrian counts or bike counts necessarily. But the community's input on those matters is going to be real helpful to us figuring out, all right, what systems need to be in place to support the density that's currently existing.
Okay.
So for what it's worth.
No, that's good. That's good clarification. Thank you. Okay, Rachel. So, Judy.
The only thing that I would piggyback on what Ned is saying is because people are not coming and going as they typically had been, that I guess the committee definitely needs to keep in mind that that all the data needs to be open-ended. That as we get back to, quote, our new normal, that there's going to be much more traffic coming and going, many more people, maybe, or fewer people walking during the day, but maybe later in the afternoon and such as that. So it's one of the things that the committee definitely needs to remember, that this is not a once and done kind of data seeking.
Yeah, I think they understand that. Okay. Let me move on. Rachel, do you have anything else in terms of other areas you want to mention?
One other thing is the form-based code goes to the board next week for a work session, and we'll wait and see what they say. But if they support it and kind of endorse the draft, it will go to public hearing in 2021 and hopefully adoption.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So we have new business. There are two topics, one that I'm going to bring up. We have a resolution that I sent to everybody today that deals with form-based code. Let me see, did you all get it? I'm going to put it up. I'm going to share the screen, hopefully. So can everybody see that? So this is a resolution. Nancy authored it. Nancy, we're going to take a few seconds to describe what it entails, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. It's a very simple resolution covering a very complex project that's gone on for a while. Since the board is having a work session on the 16th of December, I think it, at least perspective, and hopefully Ned's and Rachel's, would be appropriate for us to continue to be engaged. And the way to do that in this, I mean, I would rather be there in person, but it doesn't work that way these days, is to perhaps do a resolution. It's an expression of appreciation to Rachel and Michaela, and I am confident countless other county staff. The work is impressive. I don't know if any of you have read the whole document. I keep working through it. It's really quite incredible as the presentation the end of October. So this is a resolution to let the board know that we are still engaged and really support the staff and appreciate the efforts.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to make a motion to?
Sure. I move that we accept this resolution.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to take this off, if you don't mind, so I can see everybody. Okay, so any discussion before we go forward? Judy?
Yeah, it's a point that I have some concerns about this resolution being presented with one of the individuals just sitting here. Typically, when a letter of recognition or appreciation is being presented, the people that it's focused on are not involved in the conversation, or they are, at the meeting. So I'm just bringing that up as a point.
Yeah, okay, thank you. But the person who is represented is not voting, so.
Right, but people might have things that they would like to say, but with the individual sitting here, they might have some reservations, not to say that they would, but just the idea that, I know I've been in other groups when a letter of appreciation or whatever is being presented, that the individuals are asked if they would like to leave and given that option.
Okay.
So it doesn't become an awkward situation. I
Thank
just
you.
thought I would mention that.
Okay, Tom, did you have your hand up? No, oh, I see. Oh, you did have it. Okay, so with that, thank you. Let's have I'm going to call for a vote on it. All in favor, or just raise your hand. Let's see what happens. So I have 1, 2. Okay. Well, is anybody against it or abstain? Anybody abstain? Judy will abstain, and nobody. And Marty Davis, you want to abstain? Yes. Okay. So the motion is passed. I have to do the count. So we have 2 abstain, and everybody else.
The abstentions, by definition, vote with the majority, so it's unanimous.
Okay.
I don't believe so.
I have to check that.
I think that needs to be clarified with Robert's Rules of Order.
I'll clarify it when we send it over, okay?
Okay.
So I know there's 2 abstentions and everybody else voted for it. Thank you. Okay, so I have one other topic. I just wanted to say that in the next month, we're gonna have a busy year. So we have next month's meeting is January 28th. We're going to start hopefully on looking at the master plan in some detail. The first area we're going to look at is land use. I happen to have gotten a master plan one time. I don't know how. So I have actually a written copy. You can see it's thick. So we're going to take a small section of it and spend maybe 2 or 3 or 4 sessions looking over maybe a 6-month period, looking at the land use section to provide some input into the county. The county, of course, in parallel, is going to start hopefully working on the comp plan update. And so this may help them too to think about how they take our comments and our ideas and work it into a more generic comp plan principle. So that's one thing we're going to do. We're going to have elections. We're going to talk about the Rio Corridor study, and we'll also have any items for a town hall for Ned in the next in January. So we're going to have a busy January meeting. I don't think anybody else have any other topics they would like to bring up. Okay. With that, I'd like to, first of all, wish everybody a happy and a safe holiday, and look forward to seeing everybody in January. And we'll be in touch a little by email. I'll send everybody a link to the Places29 master plan in January. You don't have to look at it right now, it'll make you sick. You can download it. So that with that, I think we can say goodbye. Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.